Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We are back with a new episode of the Liminal PodQuest. And today is another one of those super complex topics to talk about, democracy and freedom. In the pandemic, during climate change, in the Anthropocene. So before we start, we would like to say hello to everyone listening. And if you feel like it, it would be nice if you can leave in the chat where you're listening from so that we get an idea of who's there. And and we can connect to the different places in the world. And please keep a respectful attitude when you are interacting with each other. And keep an eye on the comments because we will be posting lots of links and information that you can follow up afterwards. And thanks a lot also to Unite, the platform that is streaming our content once again. So thank you guys for doing that. Thanks for the Boom team for allowing the Liminal PodQuest to continue. And now I pass the word to Ivan.
So, today's episode is going to focus on Hong Kong and the citizens pro-democracy movement there. A movement that I heard about over a year ago and didn't pay much attention to. We're flooded with news of political shit shows globally, the pressure cooker that COVID has created, of the breakdown of a lot of our economic systems, and the new emerging despots in Turkey or Brazil or the United States hasn't helped the situation. So there's a lot that we're constantly bombarded with. But if we really are going to be global citizens and there is going to be some sort of global solidarity, we really do need to pay attention to what's going on, maybe in different continents and maybe in our backyards. So we decided to create some space to hunker down and learn a little bit more about what's going on in the streets in Hong Kong, a battle that seems to be between citizens and governments, while the US and mainland China are going into what seems like a rehash of the Cold War. So let's see what we're going to learn from the streets of Hong Kong, but not in Hong Kong at the moment.
Yeah, because in a way, it feels to me that the young people in Hong Kong, they are to politics. They are to politics as what the Fridays for Future kids are to ecology. In a way, they are allowing us to stop for a moment and think what really matters. And so we were in touch with the young people participating in the protest in Hong Kong already for inviting them to be part of the Liminal Village program for the 2020 edition, which didn't happen. But because now it's such a delicate moment for the protests in Hong Kong, we thought that it would be good to share our platform with them and listening directly from them what's happening and how we can support. So in this regard, I would like actually to make a disclaimer. These are crazy times, and we are aware that calling people to the streets to fight for freedom is part of a strategy that is being used by many different groups, including ones that not necessarily we would like to support. So because is it true that the kind of regulations that we have to comply with, like wearing masks and lockdowns, they might seem authoritarian, but actually in this episode, we would like to invite a deeper reflection about the differences in the different countries. And so, yeah, each country has a different reality. So let's apply that to then how we react to these feelings of authoritarianism. So having said that, Ivan maybe is ready to introduce our guests.
All right, so everybody keep an open mind, listen carefully, and let us welcome straight from the front lines of the Hong Kong fast-flowing pro-democracy movement, Simon Chang and Francis Hui. I'm gonna ask Francis, how are you doing and what's up? What's your story with the Hong Kong movement?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm Frances Hui. I am the Executive Director of We the Hong Kongers, which is an US organization that is committed to promote and support the culture and identity of Hong Kongers here in the US. And I started my involvement in social movement around at my age of 14, and I went to the US for college and just graduated actually last spring. I was majoring in journalism and minoring in political science. And so now, after graduation, I devoted myself mostly to the organization and work on things that are for like supporting the movement and try to spread awareness to the international audience, which includes congressional members, lawmakers in the U.S., and also just in general the American audience. And I also work on initiatives with other impacted communities that includes like Tibetans, Taiwanese, Uyghurs, all around the world. And yeah, so I focus on international kind of initiatives. So yeah.
Terrific. Good to have you here. And Simon, would you want to give us a few words about yourself and your involvement with the movement?
Yeah, nice to meet you all. I'm Simon. Suppose that all of you may heard about my name. Years ago in August, that I was the employee of the British consulate in Hong Kong, and I was on a business trip, and then I've been detained, have been held for about 2 weeks, and I've been tortured and then forced to confess. And one of the aims and objective for them would be, using me as a proxy to represent the UK to instigate the protesting back in Hong Kong. So I experienced like that, and I'm so lucky I've been back to Hong Kong, and I fled from Hong Kong almost immediately to Taipei and now in London. And I chose to speak out, and exactly a years ago. And to me, I would feel like that is part of like a whistleblower. And more than that, based on that I keep to do the advocacy, because to me, previously, I'm just, although a bit low profile, but still continuously to support the pro-democracy protester. And like I set up the Hong Kongers in Britain because the UK government just initiates the BNO visa scheme for almost 3 million, British national overseas citizens to come to the UK. And that is quite important because we would like to solidify the Hong Kong overseas community. And in the future, we will see what we can do, because you can obviously see now back in Hong Kong, within the system is less and less legal ground for us to do the pro-democracy movement. Either you have been persecuted. So that's why I'm here in London, and I'll just keep on doing that with Frances.
And who's your friend over there that we can see next to you, a little doll?
Oh, yeah. So this is kind of like a gift from the protesters. I never ever met her before, but I received it from another protesters on site when I was in the protest site in London. And it's quite warm that the girl in Australia, that is a handmade doll for the fundraising to support the frontline protesters if they wanted to leave Hong Kong and seek sanctuary, and that's they give me the gift. So that is so meaningful for me. So that's why all the times when I do the webinar, and then this guy with me.
Nice. And I have to say that both of you, having experienced the experience you experienced in your 20s, just show a lot of other 20-something-year-olds how privileged they are to not be having to deal with the dramatic repercussions that you have in your lives based on your political engagement. And I would also love to make a shout out to Daniel Wong, a friend of yours and somebody who's part of the movement, who really helped us out in the preliminary conversations we had in preparing this episode to get a grasp of the complexity of the whole issue.
Sure.
So we're going to ask a mix of questions that both we've prepared and that the wider Boomer community and the online community asked us. So we're going to integrate a few of these alongside some memes that we add into the episode. So we're going to start with just a little comical meme that shows global perception of Hong Kong, how the world sees Hong Kong as swimming flush in cash, how Americans, geographically challenged Americans, see Hong Kong as Japan, how China sees Hong Kong, well, as something that's in conflict and combative, how video games see Hong Kong, the cyberpunk, steampunk visuals, how tourists see Hong Kong with an image from Confessions of a Shopaholic, and what Hong Kongers are actually like. And there's an image of a very adorable kid with a Game Boy and a headset. Overall message, we have a lot of filters and biases in how we perceive a culture globally. And I'm gonna pass it over to Chiara now.
Yeah, so let's start with the first question that I would like to ask Simon. And it's about the general historical context in which the protests evolved. So it started in 2012 with this student movement to block the enforcement of the national education program, but then it evolved in 2014 with the Umbrella Revolution, and then it evolved further in 2019 with the pro-democracy protests. So what can you tell us about this evolution, imagining that you're telling it to someone who never heard of it?
Well, yeah, I think that is keeping brief and simple. That is about the Hong Kong people. They wanted to get more political rights within the system. And actually, this kind of the democratization movement for Hong Kong people can be traced back to many years ago. And even like before 1997, the sovereignty have been transferred from the UK to China. That lots of people, they worry about, for example, maybe the people know about, 4th June massacre back in Beijing. Still lots of Chinese people, they wanted to have more political rights at that time. They have more freedoms, more than that now, you can say. So that kind of things that always that for Hong Kong people, because based on the joint declaration between the UK and China, we can enjoy more specific freedoms than you could be never seen in mainland China. So it's, Hong Kong would be like a haven for many dissidents from China when they try to avoid the political turmoil or civil war and then come here. So Hong Kong have been long regarded as like an immigration society. And when you see about recently the protests or the people, they change their mindset to see Hong Kong, it would be traced back to 2014, the Umbrella Revolution, because that is the starting point for those people to see that is the dead end of the political reform, which is led by the Donald Trump, the chief executive at that time. To be honest, after 1997, and Donald Trump would be a very honeymoon for Hong Kong people, that at least that he's a little bit, open-minded to listen about the voice of the opposition. However, that Beijing is going to be very tough, and Hong Kong people decide either you live it or take it, and then we live it, because that's kind of the so-called political reform for us would be pre-selected by Beijing, and then we can have one person, one vote to pick our chief executive, our leader. So that's kind of things that we met a lot of the predicament, and then we decide a little bit radical from that, for the time at the moment that we see from the Hong Kongers' perspective, we built up the barricade, we occupied the roads, we blocked the traffic. So it already makes a breakthrough to most of the Hong Kong people. And at that time, because the people, they very care about the rule of law or etc. But you can see, and when the chief executive have been, changed to be like CY Land, and it's going to be more and more aggressive. They wanted to suppress the dissent, and Hong Kong people, they try to, to do it in more radical way. And even the forms and the model of the protest have been changed, because previously in 2014, it's quite traditional that we see, usually that a student lead public intellectuals leads the protest, and we have see the center and specific organization which was leading the protest. But when it changed to 2019, you can see that's disorganized it, and the people, because they face even harsh risk, and also because they have a little bit skeptical to the leader, then they wear the mask, and then you can see that they've been bottom up, and you can see that they're even formless, leaderless to do the protest. So this kind of the transformation of the protest is worthy to see, because we're not sure what's the next step in the future, whether we'll still have the protest or not, and in what form that we can continue. So we just want to make it in brief, is that the whole campaign for us would be in what way we can achieve the full democracy. Either previously in 2014, we just basically based on democracy or our rights, and in lately and develop a new sense of identity as a Hong Kongers. So this kind of things that we are finding a way to get to full democracy. So we are still on that way to do, and we're finding the way.
Thank you, Simon. So in a way, I would say that I would summarize that this is a long fight for self-determination. It's a fight to be recognized as entitled to choose who's going to be your government, who can vote for the representatives of that government, instead of having someone else choosing that for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the protests in 2019, they got very intense, and also, some violence happened, and we will talk about this later. But I would like to show now a video that is the 5 requests that were put forward from the protesters to stop, like 5 conditions to stop protesting. And also this video is going to show us how the protesters that are young and they are used to a specific kind of aesthetics and video games, anime, how they put together their creativity to create a video that would really touch many people's hearts and minds.
We are a group of Hong Kongers who love our city. After our government ignored our voices and used excessive force to clear peaceful protesters, we are more determined to restate our 5 demands. 1. Full withdrawal of the extradition bill. A temporary suspension of the bill means the approval process could be resumed at a later time. We only accept a full withdrawal. 2. Retraction of the riot characterization. Unarmed peaceful protesters were attacked violently by the police force using lethal weapons. Therefore, we do not accept the characterization of the protest as a riot. 3. Release of all arrested protesters, especially the students and the wounded. We demand the government to drop all charges against them and promise there will be no future persecution. 4. Investigation of the police accountability for brutality. We demand that all police officers who used excessive violence against protesters and journalists be held accountable for their actions. 5. Carrie Lam's resignation. It is clear that the chief executive continued to ignore the public opinion and has led to the escalation of the situation. With the total loss of confidence in her capability, we demand Carrie Lam's resignation immediately. We will not back down until all our demands are met.
wow. Very strong and powerful. So, as I said before, this was put out in 2019 and the situation has changed. And so we will look into what are the current developments of the situation a bit later. And so I would like to pass back to Ivan for the next question.
All right, so we can see just how much these young protesters are laying on the line, with over 10,000 people arrested, and about 60% are under the age of 29. So Francis, what are the values that are fueling you all? What's your dynamo?
Yeah, I think after watching that video, you can tell that people were really on the streets for the chance of self-determination. We need the freedom to live without fear and determine our own future. It's all because, like, right now, if you are in Hong Kong, you know that we can't even live our lives normally. To us, normal means that you have the freedom to speak your mind, you have the freedom to buy whatever you want, a book that you want to read, anything that you want to see, political speeches and political opinions or any press coverage about the movement should not be censored, right? They should be out there available for everyone to have access to. But then for a lot of the young people, the reason why they go out to the streets is, one is because we have nothing to lose. We are young, but everything that we have no control on our own future. I think that's the most frustrating part for young people, is that as young people, we have less control on what we can do already, right? But then the only thing that we have is our future. And it's not something that we can see, or like it's something very unstable, something that we can't even control. We can't determine our own future because you're living at a place that the government controls everything, and the government does not care about your opinions, whether it's about the government or whether it's about the system. They just don't care. And so you're seeing the place that you grew up in are slowly getting different, and it's going toward to a system that would basically eliminate all the freedom you were born to have. And one thing I want to add on is that the video we just saw, for the 50 men, it says we're asking for KLM to back down, right? But when we got toward, I think like 2 months after the movement started, we actually changed our 50 men. It's to have universal suffrage, because we truly understand that having KLM, step down, it's not the solution. We need a systematic change. We need actually the people have the right to determine their own future, to determine the future of Hong Kong, and to choose something that is the best for everyone in Hong Kong. And so we kind of changed it. And for us, for a lot of us, if we achieve universal suffrage, that's everything that we want. Even if, like, when we have the chance to have a vote, or we have an election to determine the future of Hong Kong, even if it's people choose to have one country, one system, and be part of China, I think everyone would respect that, right? And so that's the beauty of democracy, I think, and that's why we're here on the streets.
And for those who are non-native speakers, universal suffrage is the right for every citizen to vote and participate in democratic systems and elections. And you're also setting precedents, narrative precedents, by choosing to not have this movement be labeled as a riot, but as the right of citizens to dissent, is actually securing the freedom to protest for future generations, hopefully. One thing that we'd like to also show is just the amount of art, and this is participatory art that has emerged from the community to further inspire, that is being shared on social media. Posters are being created, projections are being created. And we just wanted to show a few images because art and imagery is a hugely important component to capturing popular imagination, to inspire and aspire for something better. So the first image is, for those who are listening and don't have the visuals, it says, "If I succumb to fear, Hong Kong will fall apart." And there's a young protester with an anti-gas mask and visor and headgear. Another image that is in a different aesthetic, but again, it's a gamer's aesthetic. It's fresh. It's contemporary. Has the quote, "The time has chosen our generation to fight. We are the chosen ones." Young people need bolstering to believe that they have an ability to fight and stand up against much stronger powers. So the David versus Goliath story plays out. And in the last image, even the darkest night will end. Together we fight. And there are two worn out, tired young protesters embracing one another. Again, giving us some, hitting the feels, because hitting the feels is part of good campaign work. And over back to you, Chiara.
Yeah, so we've talked about the values, we've talked about the historical evolution of the movement, And now I would like to touch on the tactics. What is so unique about this movement, Simon? What is it also about the Be Water way that we quote in our title? Can you explain us a bit about the specificities of the Hong Kong protests?
Yeah, so in 2019, I think that is almost brand new tactics we never ever seen, like back on the Hong Kong streets. Those, we call it Be Water, actually, which is the motto from Bruce Lee, which is a very famous martial arts star. When the Hong Kong pop culture is very, very, powerful in the whole Asia, and even in the West. So Be Water is actually the philosophy of the Bruce Lee, how to exert the power of the Eastern martial arts. Be Water seems like, although it had been inclusive, when you hit the water, and then they would absorb your power. But once the water had been burst, like water cannon, which is very powerful. So that it means that it's very, concrete example to illustrate the inclusiveness of the protest. And you can see, for example, when I was on the front line during the protest, and we're doing lots of the flash mob activities, and we're trying not to disturb other people, but like to distract the attention of the police. That's we try to consume the energy and to increase more cost of the government and the more cost of the governance and management to maintain so-called the orders of the society, because in that way we can feel that is a strength. That is a strength for the people. And because, it's so impressive when you show the image and the arts, that is to raise awareness of the people to care about the values of the Hong Kong people, to stand with democracy and freedom, and that is touching to the people. And moreover, that's about the tactics, which is very, very, very realistic and down on earth. When you was one of the frontline protesters facing the riot police, that they're very, set up the front line, and then you're facing that fear have been haunting to most of the people that time. And you heard a lot of like the sounds like gun, shouting, screaming, and you can sense that like the smokes and gas or something, like you're in a battlefield or something. And that tag is so important because that could protect you. So for example, like most of people are using signals, and we're using fake names, and even those people when they mix face to face, or even they don't know who is who because we all mastered. But you would feel that sense that we can stand together because not because we know your name, not because we know your face, is but because that, okay, we are not alone. We're standing with the same value, and we receive the message anonymously on signals, which is, automatically deleted. Or you can, access Telegram, which has no backdoor. I'm not sure now, but that time there has no backdoor can be accessed by the government, and you have been easily included into the channels that you can see the updates and, for example, like the movement or action from the police, and you can feel, in what way that you can engage with the activities. So spontaneous, and so, like all the people that can be a leader, and all the people can be participants. So that is so impressive to the world, especially to the media. And I can recommend you to read one of the articles from the Hong Kong Free Press. They very, very accurately to explain, in what way or tactics that the protester would do. And it's quite effective. So that's why Beijing would feel so scary. And that's why once that the protest is gonna be fatigued, and being a little bit phased out and consuming the energy, and then they do much more than that, since they imposed national security law back in Hong Kong. So I would feel it just only reflects that how effective the tactics of the protest we were doing. And so that's kind of things I would feel they are scary. And when I've been detained by the Chinese state security apparatus, and at that time, it's exactly even far before the national security law imposed it back in Hong Kong. So it's illegal. I would say that's de facto illegal if they operate if the state security police, the secret police, they operate in Hong Kong, that is illegal. But that's why I've been detained and delivered back to Shenzhen to face the interrogation. And they feel so scared because they tried their best to find anyone, like leaders or specific organizations, to lead the protest. They don't believe there's anonymously, spontaneously, or leaderless. They don't believe in that way, or because their senior leaders request them to give them a scapegoat they want. So that's usual. That is the usual way, or the logics usually that the state security police would think that must be some black hands behind the scenes. That must be some foreign powers or rebellious leaders that, to control the whole situation or something. So that's why they asked me and forced me to draft the organizational chart for them, but which is, enforced to do so. So I feel that is so, brand new to Hong Kong. So that is quite unique around the world.
Actually, Simon, I would like to quote your friend Daniel Wong, who told us at some point, there is no hero in this movement because actually anybody can be a game changer. And I think this quote is really something that can summarize the Be Water feeling, the Be Water ethos. And
which is quite different to some more Eurocentric movements. And this is some of the criticism that Greta Thunberg got, because there was this hero glorification component to becoming an icon. And this is, I think, something that's been executed very well in Hong Kong, that it is, in fact, leaderless and collective. And to this point, another piece of art.
That we actually been through that. We had icons, we have leaders who led protest in Hong Kong back in, I think, 2012. That's the year when Joshua Wong started the anti-national education movement. And then in 2014 we have the umbrella movement, and we have a couple of student leaders becoming the icon of the movement. But we see the problem is that a lot of times when we get towards the like the middle part of the movement, people start to think that these leaders do not represent them, and sometimes these leaders will get tired too, and they are not able, they're not capable to lead this amount of crowd, this amount of people who are participating in the protest. And so I think it's after 6 years of having this kind of young generation movement, people start to think that having a leader is not something that it's not as efficient as having a be water tactic, because anyone can be a leader in this movement and they can do something. And I think the benefits of using this tactic is that people can just jump in on things that they feel confident about. In this movement, we see people who have like professionals in different fields, like designers, video makers, or just in general, like people who write, people who are more of an action people. They jump into the roles, the parts that they feel more confident about. And so you see these like pictures that you just show, they're from the nameless designers who just feel like they want to express their feeling in a graphical way, right? And so literally we don't have a leader and anyone can do something for the movement. And that's like, I think that's something that have prolonged the movement. It's a strategy that prolonged the movement compared to the movement we had before. In 2016, in 2014, the umbrella movement only lasted for 79 days, which was really long, but it's still shorter than the movement we had last year. And I think that's like something it's important to mention about the be water tactic.
Nice. And also lessons learned from past movements. So a win there. And to add further evidence to your claims, we have this image from Hong Kong Polytechnic of honoring one of the cooks that said that I will stay until the last kid leaves. These kinds of images are contributing to an anti-classist narrative that anybody is not only welcome, but integral to the movement. People support in any which way. And often these silent supporters that don't get attention have been getting attention, and purely because the production of this content is so organic, like you said. But I would like this to change gears, and I would like you to comment, Francis, a little bit about the criticism the movement has received because allegedly protesters have been using violence in their clashes with the police. And I would like you to comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think this is something that was discussed around like last July. It's because a lot of protesters were going to they got into the legislative council in Hong Kong by cracking the glasses door and last siege of the legislative council. And so a lot of the foreign media start to portray Hong Kong protesters as radical protesters and or like protesters that use violence in the movement, and it was being labeled as like a more radical protest instead of a non-violent protest anymore. But I think this kind of mentality is actually unfair to the protesters, because by saying, by criticizing the use of violence by protesters, you're blaming the protesters instead of the government. But the protesters are oppressed. And you can see that at the beginning of the movement, everything happens very peacefully. People were unarmed. And you can see there is unproportionate force on June 12th, there were the police actually issued like 300 rounds of tear gas, rubber bullets, and other sort of bullets. And in the fight at the PolyU, they used over 3,000. I forgot the actual number that was used, but it was thousands of bullets that were being used in one day versus unarmed protesters. And so in this kind of unproportionate force, I think we have to look at the problem. The problem is that the government is not listening to the people, even when they were unarmed and they were protesting peacefully. If there is a lack of formal channel for political change, people would have to resort to a more radical means to force the government to react in response to our demands. And that's why people decided to increase their force. But I would say that none of us is actually, looting or like targeting people who are like innocent. It's not like that. It's about we're doing something to try to change the atmosphere of the society and try to make people know that we're not in a normal term. We're not living in a normal world. It's never normal. And so everyone have to wake up and join us. And it's important to ask the governments to respond and actually use some kind of force to force them to react. And I would say it's honestly, it's not very violent. It's a more radical way to, make more to amplify our voice, basically.
And whoever has inhaled tear gas and felt a rubber bullet, they'll know that that's pretty violent. And we have a little meme that emerged here from the Black Lives Matter movement as a critique on violence that says, looting and rioting suck, but if people rioted every time a cop murdered someone, politicians would be forced to enact meaningful social change and address inequality. For some reason, there's a puff in there because the internet is a strange place with strange associations, but the message remains.
Yes, if I could, I add a little bit one more point. Is like I would feel that it's more meaningful for those people to understand why the violence would happen and why what is the root cause to that kind of like violence. So I will always that we emphasize that some violence is intacit. Actually, we can't see that obviously, and the system, which is like to manage, and even it have been last for many years, and the people that they have been suffering. And now that's the totalitarianism, like when we see a lot of cases back in mainland China, the human rights lawyers, the dissidents, that they have been tortured, they cannot, face a fair trial. It have been finally expanded from mainland China to Hong Kong. And the Hong Kong people that they want to safeguard even more justified, more, just society. And even those violence that you can see, the extreme, but that is a reaction to the government's behavior and the policy. So if we put it more meaningful way that we want to add on is that what kind of the solution we can give and what kind of the reason that's kind of the people, why they have been put in that way. So I would feel at that point, that is a more meaningful way for us. It's not national security law or even harsher suppression would be the end. That actually would trigger even more violence we don't really want to see in the future. So you can see, and that's why the regime have been losing hope to the people, is because that's the people that understand the only way they react to people's anger is suppression. So that's why the people that wake up and then they even to do it in more radical way. And that kind of things would justify the people why they have no other choice. And that would be the last resort to do the revolution. And the revolution would happen commonly in a human society, like, the United States. That's why the basement of the foundation, why that we should be proud of, because that is the democracy. So I would feel our people, we really sympathize to that. And that is the only way that the government, if they wanted to take the responsibility, and that is responsible for that, they need to take care of the people, why they would feel so angry. So that's the thing I want to add on.
You gotta remember, after the June 12th the protest, there were at least 3 weeks that the Carrie Lam didn't respond to the press, didn't respond to the public at all, even when the society was in turmoil and people were on the streets every single day, and no one wants to throw themselves to that kind of situation. I have seen kids that were only like 10 years old was on the scene, and they were getting the tear gas, they were being tear gassed. And just now when I mentioned about the PolyU, I just looked up the number. They actually used 10,000 of rounds of bullets in that battle. And you can like imagine just one tear gas is gonna get you suffocate. And so imagine all these like college students, they're stuck in their campus and they were not even able, they have no access to food and stuff. This is the only way that they can, combat this regime, is to do whatever they can to survive, right? So I think it's really unfair to say, to blame them, because it's the responsibility of the government to respond to the protesters.
Well, thank you guys. This was really instructive, and yeah, it really touches me to see how hard are the issues that you're confronted with at such young age, and how much you're doing it also for the next generations, so for the kids that are now children. So I would like to ask Simon, what has been the feedback about the protests from other Asian countries? Are you creating alliances? Are you also in touch with dissidents in mainland China? Is it even possible? What can you say about this?
Well, you can see at least, like the sympathy would be quite common. So you see in Asia, in neighborhood, especially Taiwan, we hugely affected the result of the presidential election in Taiwan, and it triggered a lot of alert from the Taiwanese people, because actually they're also facing the same threat from the authoritarian regime. They just always dream one day that the country could be unified, but the things is, previously in Taiwan, those people, they still believe, China is gonna be richer and rising, and then they should be proud as Chinese, but they also care about how to protect their own ways of living, and especially the freedom and democracy that they now enjoy. And that's always that they wanted to proud of, because that is one of the, you can say, part of like Chinese culture, but they can quite execute a very vibrant democracy. Although that's not perfect, but at least that is democracy. So, and also you can see Thailand. The Thailand's also face similar challenges. The abusive power have been enjoyed by the royal family in Thailand. And also you can see that excessive police brutality. We can feel very similar scenarios and scenes that we can see now in Thailand. So you can see that as like a multi-alliance, that we learned lots of the sense of humor from Thailand, how to rebuke the criticism of the Malayan Chinese netizens. And Hong Kong, Hong Kong is, the stereotypes that Hong Kongers would feel, Hong Kong people would be more direct and mean. So that's, you can see the slogan sometimes, it's quite direct, and we blame the bad police in Hong Kong, etc. But you can see those slogans back in Thailand, that they use lots of memes or cartoons or etc. We learned and appreciate that sense of humor, and that's the required very, powerful to those propaganda from the Chinese Communist Party. And but you can see also some skepticism in some neighborhood, for example, like in Singapore, because they share the similar values with like China model or like Beijing consensus. They believe that a very strong leadership to maintain their prosperity. Why? That's still very realistic to think, okay, that is about the power struggle between the United States and China, and now Hong Kong, those people have been instigated or manipulated by the Western imperialism to expand or to exert, like so-called democracy or freedom in here, but the aims to subvert China. So I feel because in Singapore, they're very, that's they already make a trade-off. That's the trade-off is like they give up some political rights in return to get more economic benefits. So it fits the tone like Chinese model or China model now wanted to present. And that's, they would feel, okay, Hong Kong is quite, they're losing their bargaining power to be a financial center. If they would like to be loyal to China or succumb to China or kowtow to China, then they could, maintain their status. But they couldn't, they dehumanized those people. It's not just about economy. It's about the value of the humanity that people wanted to get the dignity back. Although, Hong Kong people, they're rich. So you can show the first image to see, the world to see Hong Kong is quite rich. To be honest, yes. But, like in London, in the United Kingdom, Hong Kong people in average, they get more, 14% more salary than the Londoners and, the British citizens in here. But that's just like the data. We're also facing a very huge problems of the wealth gap, like the people that are very extremely poor, and the Gini index would be the top ones around the world. So that is the expensive living cost as well. So we can also see the cost, why we wanted to maintain so-called prosperity and to make a small sacrifice for our political freedoms. So that's kind of things that the Hong Kong people, at least the majority of the Hong Kong people, they make the choice is that we need to stand with the values for democracy. We also believe only democracy could give us to distribute the wealth more fairly. So these kind of things that, like the feedbacks of the world would be quite different, but in general, those, democratic countries will stand with us. And for example, like recently we're doing activism for Hong Kong in UK. We have been invited a lot by the Japanese institution. We understand even like Japan, they're concerned about, the situation now in Hong Kong. And then they worry about the expanding totalitarianism from China. So they're willing to educate more about the situation of Hong Kong and even Taiwan to Japanese people. So I would feel that is quite successful. That's to raise the awareness of the people that care about Hong Kong, which is not just very far away, because that would be a chain effect. If we just leave Hong Kong alone, that's next time would be you. And we need to stand together to stop the dominant effect. And that's kind of things like Japan would be very, very uncertain, and that they feel insecure. The UK recently, the very influential think tank Policy Exchange also, announced the documents to argue and to urge the UK government to change the foreign policy, not just only focusing on the economy and the pollute, and also about some content have been written by the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. So you can see how cooperative, and then on this kind of the issues of Hong Kong, that they stand together. So no matter 5G, no matter Five Eyes Alliance and even the future more democratic alliance could be more, showing solidarity. And we can expect maybe in the future would be Biden administration. We're not sure yet, but it's likely, and would be using more multilateral strategy to collect those people and countries together to contain the influence of China. It's not just for anti-China. It's for to stop the expanding totalitarianism and actually serving the interests of the people, even from China, because we safeguard their own rights and freedom.
So it's good to hear that there's lessons to be shared from the international community, and that one is inspiring another, and that there is communication. But I do have a question about alliances, because the Hong Kong protesters got some support from various parts of the political spectrum, and some of those might have a different agenda. For example, if there are certain political groups with anti-Chinese sentiments, as you mentioned, Simon, maybe that is the primary reason why they're supporting the Hong Kong protests, and not because they actually care about democracy. And maybe you could both quickly chime in on that.
Yeah, I think for not just Hong Kongers, anyone who are being any person who are being oppressed, obviously you look for alliance and you look for outside support. Just as Hong Kong, when we just started the movement, we immediately know the importance of getting international support. So we had, some initiative of posting advertisement on different newspaper outside of Hong Kong, and ask for international support, basically. So I think for Hong Kong people, all of us fights for freedom, fights for justice, and the values that we just mentioned before. And while it is important to understand there are differences between different groups, and we have different stands, we're just on different spot of the political spectrum. We understand it's important for us to understand other people's values and see if it lines up to ours. But I don't think it is, necessarily the responsibility of the oppressed, because it's not fair to ask them to, draw a strong line with someone who are who are fighting for the same thing we're fighting for. Sometimes you just need to join forces with other oppressed groups to amplify your voices, right? And so we will never have like an identical pair of groups to ally with, but it's important for us to remember that we're all here fighting for justice, and we're all here fighting for the values we want. We want the democratization of Hong Kong and all other places that are being affected, including the groups that I just mentioned, Tibet, Taiwan, and also the East Turkestan area. So I think, we are constantly trying to get more support from other, from the, outside world, because our voices is not enough to ask people to support us in terms of challenging a regime, the CCP regime. We have to join forces with other people, even though we have differences.
Yeah, so I think that's very hard to avoid to stop maybe some of the groups that say they're not that totally for human rights, that maybe sometimes they stand with the national security or national interest. So that's part of the comment that why the people would feel Donald Trump would be even tougher on China, because that's they would feel American first. But I would feel no matter what, and the national security or etc., natural interest, etc., and that is quite common if you would see, like the political elites or the political leaders, and even that's very, very common in mainland China. That's those Chinese people, they always feel, okay, we are now going to be G2 and China is going to be rising, and we're competing with the United States to get the hegemonic power around the world, to be like alternative way to be a new superpower, etc. But no matter what, I would still believe we're very hot. We're living in a very complex world. But in Hong Kong, those people, they ask for that is very simple. It would just regard it as like a human being. They just wanted to, to get the rights to speak freely, to criticize their own governments and the leaders. That is very simple, but we're living in the complicated world. So naturally, those people, they would make the things is going to be complicated, but it's not totally false, but sometimes it's, it's true. But I would feel, to be honest, that we're not that powerful. We're in a very small land. What we're asking for is like to reignite the awareness of the humanity, and we're not to be dehumanized, to be just like a pawn on the chest between the great powers. That's all the people. There's just easily to frame it in that way, but try to be like dissolve as like we're all the same. We're just put all those labels. You are United States citizens or UK citizens or Hong Kongers, put it aside. If you're just a human being, whether you wanted to have your own freedom to criticize those people or do small bunch of people to hold power, that is about the checks and balance. So we need to reignite the awareness of the liberalism and idealism rather than, realism or materialism. That's those people will feel, is about power, wealth, or something. That is the origin of the fascism. I mean, that is the origin of the war. That's if you can trace back the history. Why, if one of the nations that most of the people, they commonly feel, they just believe in power and wealth, rich and gonna be superpower or something. They don't believe in democracy and freedom. They will finally expand. They don't know what is peace. So I think that is important. So that's why that Hong Kong is standing for.
And like you're saying, things are really complicated, but a big part of movement building today is how to hold complicated alliances. And an integral part of that is being vigilant on who supports whom and why. The why is important, and it can change. So that's where the vigilance comes in, because there's always the possibility for a secondary agenda at play in precisely what you're talking about, the power struggle and the power fights that are happening at various levels of society. But I would like to also just quickly ask you, Simon, how has the pandemic affected the movement, or has it, and in what way?
Well, pandemic, I would feel that has massively affected the momentum of the protests, especially back in Hong Kong. You can see the Hong Kong authorities finally find a very legitimate reason to suspend the elections going to be regionally happened a few months ago. And what we can expect, of course, that's the pro-democracy camp would have a landslide victory. But it's hard to say because at the end of the day, the election had been rigged by Beijing, but still, 16% of the votes still have been for pro-democracy camp, but we only can get less than 14% of the seats back in the Legislative Council. But still, we wanted to engage. But the thing is, they found a very perfect so-called legitimate reason because they really, really wanted to depoliticize the things, especially my reason why I've been detained. They said that I solicit prostitutes, but that is the politicized reason. And then they wanted to show it actually that is a political motivation behind it. So that is the usual tactics they were doing. And moreover, that's they use it as an excuse to stop the people to meet together. But of course, that's a like they limit those people together. And of course, that suppress those people they've been on the street. And even up to the national security law, even you dare to be on the street, and then they will detain you, they will arrest you, they will interrogate you just because the words you chant, the slogan you chant, or the t-shirt you wear. So it's so unimaginable if you regard that as a free society in Hong Kong. There is no Hong Kong anymore, because that's how ridiculous things they are now doing. during the pandemic. So I can't say, that is totally conspiracy theory that's, the pandemic so coincident why that has happened, right after the protest and disturb the whole, momentum of the protest. So I would feel it's a bit unlucky to the people. That's the people they now is going to be disconnected. But the things, if we wanted to put it in the way to see more positively, is that, it's going to be, previously always when I was, working for the UK government, I'm promoting trade and investment between China and the UK. We believe multilateralism. We believe to promote trade and investment, the people or the world should be connected together. But the thing is, the pandemic also, they decoupling. They've been more wary and cautious about China. It's not because the virus actually is not, Chinese virus or something, but they will feel why that's they so slowly to react to contain the virus to expand to the world. Why? It's because not only judicial system, but also their media is not free. They try to suppress the freedom of the information that be accessed, and the people they always to see in a way that okay, it can be prevented and it's all under control, and to easily to let the international community to be not to be guarded, not to be more cautious, and always to believe okay, the people have the freedom to move or something, and we cannot discriminate the Chinese or etc. And we welcome those people, maybe they have a virus to come out of the world. So it expanded and affects the West so massively. So I would feel these are things, these are the reason that we need to see, and maybe that is one of the momentum why the second Cold War is now coming back, because of the pandemic. It's have been divided not only within the society, but also about the international community. That's they have been decoupled from the economy.
I have to say, in terms of Chinese censorship, one of my favorite animes, Attack on Titan, has been banned by the Ministry of Culture in mainland China. The reason being graphic violence and bringing into question public morality. But the story is about a small group of rebels that fight these like huge forces at very small odds. So that leads something to the imagination for what the reasons are. Yep. In fact, the real reasons. We wanted to show one last meme in relation to what you just also spoken about in the elections. There's this image of the protesters and the activists with their yellow helmets creating the bridge in this big chasm on the way to the polling station. And the people who are nonchalantly carefree walking across this bridge of bodies are saying, first time, yes. And you? Me too. First time voters. The fact that all over the world, people are waking up to political action. And however, it's important to not be oblivious to who came before you and paved the way and gave access to democracy. And we have examples from Hungary and Chile and Turkey and Brazil that are very similar. And the story of Hong Kong, I'm sure, resonates.
So I think now we shift towards another tone of questions. We would like to know a little bit more about your condition now, like how hard is it to be so far away from home and not knowing if you come back or not, if you're going to see your family again or not. What do you miss most about home?
Francis first.
Sure. I miss my family, obviously, but I miss my friends, and I just miss the Victoria Harbor and all the beautiful mountains. And I like hiking a lot, and you can find nowhere in the world that it's like Hong Kong, that everything is so compact in one place, and you can go hiking one day in the morning and then have lunch with your friends in the city and then go home for dinner. And it's just so small, and you have everything in this small area. And one thing I feel very, I really missed of being in that small and crowded area. And even though the weather sucks and it feels very humid, feels really hot over there, but it's like, it's warming. It feels like home, right? And I am most familiar with the area, and it's like when you are not at home, and that the fact that you cannot be home at all, you just don't see the future of being in Hong Kong. It's very depressing, right? And I think a year ago when I was, when I decided to take a more vocal role in this movement, I wouldn't expect that this would happen. Like, I wouldn't expect I would never be able to go back to Hong Kong, and I wasn't ready for it, right? And so it's definitely really, I think, for everyone who left home and who knows that there wouldn't be like chances for them to return home. We constantly have that kind of feelings of obviously homesick, and also it's just very depressing too. It just hits you sometimes when you're, especially when you're at night, when you're about to sleep and you're scrolling through your phone and seeing your friends are having fun at home or even suffering in Hong Kong. You feel sorry that you aren't able to be with them fighting together. And I think that's also part of my motivation to continue to work on things related to Hong Kong, is because I know that I have the privilege to be in a place that have freedom, and it's the privilege to be here and not having to face crackdown and not having to face censorship in Hong Kong. It's important for us to remember that. Yeah.
Yes. To me, I would feel I miss, of course, that my family. I have no choice but need to disassociate with my family members for the security reason, and to try to stop that they have been harassed by the state security, now have been legal status to operate in Hong Kong. And of course I miss the foods, the cuisines, dim sum back in Hong Kong. But to be honest, I a little bit, feel the living environment definitely in the UK would be much more better than in Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong it's too crowded, and we're facing a very, very deep trouble in the rocketing housing price. And I can say, like I'm paying the same in here, but it's almost triple times that's the space bigger than in Hong Kong. But I would feel that the spirit is very, very memorable for me. And that's why I've been defined what is who is me. And Hong Kong always will be like a core part of me. So I can still feel emotionally that I've been connected with the land, with my homeland deeply. And I would feel that, that the movement, the pro-democracy movement, totally changed the stereotype of, even to me. Previously, I'm out from the very bad school, like because of the colonialism, and we're a very competitive city, and they classified the schools into 3 categories, and even previously 5 categories. I'm very from very bad school, and the society never ever granted hope to us to access the university, but we try our best to fight for our destiny. And you would feel previously Hong Kong is maybe very, very, self-interested, self-centric, and we call that as value of central. It means that, well, your financial elites, you're very, very to care about your classes, and you wanted to be elites as well or something. But you would see the movement, the pro-democracy movement, exactly try to resist that kind of value, have been endorsed by the establishment. and the governments in Hong Kong. And I'm from grassroots. And that's why I'm standing with the mass public. I'm a very, 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 keen to stand with those people when the Hong Kong authorities always say, oh, that is a teenager's problems. That's those people that were rebellious, and that is some issues to the education. We need to do more things to tackle with the teachers, for example. But to me, I would feel the only moments I would be myself, truly myself, is when I wear the helmet with those people I never known before. That's moments that on the front line, I would feel, okay, I'm not alone. That's the people who fight for more justice, and we have been suppressed it, and we will feel we're scared. But at time when we're mastered, it's not only to fight for not elitism, fight for the mass public, but also it means that we are insecure, but ones that we could be, one of us, and then we will stand on the street to express our value to the world, not just to us, to the world, is that, okay, the spirit of resistance, where a little bit, for example, people will feel, okay, Hong Kong is maybe sometimes a bit rude or direct or something, but we also have the values to be brave, to stand against the authority, which the authority pretend to be very polite. The authority pretend very calm. The authority pretend very neutral. The authority pretend to be very strict of so-called rule of law or civilized it. But the people actually, we're classified as like a scums, or at the bottom from the bottom of the society. I do remember when I've been detained, back in mainland China, those state security police, those secret police blame us like you're the cannon shaft, or you're the scums of the people. Why you've been going on the street? Because you have no future. So they disdain those people. I'm so very, very sad about it, to be honest, because, previously, about 100 years ago, why the Chinese Communist Party have been set up, because they said they stand for the rights of the mass public. They stand for the rights of those farmers or workers, which is, from the bottom of the society. But now they're becoming more and more elite. They're becoming a new vested interest group to govern the people. And then even they detain those people that have no choice but, to revolt. So I feel Hong Kong is still the last hope for the people to believe and to memorize that kind of the spirit, why we stand against those people. They enjoy titles, honor, wealth, those so-called elite, but we're not stand for that. We stand for the mass public. So that's why we believe in democracy.
And you're reminding me of something that Daniel Wong also said when we spoke to him, and he said, what does loving a place really mean? It means that you would rather see it free, even if it means that you might not be able to be there. So I can't relate with what you're going through, and I can only imagine what it's like to have to be forced to leave your home because of something that you believe in. Francis, do you have any regrets ever for becoming so politically outspoken in a part of this movement?
I mean, I obviously have time that I feel like maybe I should stop. Maybe I should, stop talking or stop doing whatever I'm doing, and to gain the chance of going back to Hong Kong, to gain the chance of just be an ordinary citizen in Hong Kong, and as long as I can be with my friends and my family and be in that little place, I can do whatever I can to just limit myself or whatever. But I think those thoughts immediately go away because it kind of became my struggle for a while, but then it went away because I do know that I'm on a watch list and I can't go back anymore. And it's important for me to understand that the moment I have chosen to go on this path, it already tell people that I can't be silent. Like I can't, I'm not that kind of person that I would, silence myself and be quiet. And I should really understand that's my personality. And even if I'm told, even maybe like a year ago or back when I was 14, when I, started my activism, even if someone told me that, oh, this is what you're going to face, you're just not going to be able to be in Hong Kong anymore. And then you would have to, face the emotional problem, the mental problem that comes with it. I would still do it because one is that back in, when I was 14 years old, I wouldn't believe that. But two is that even if I was told that, I think I do whatever I think it's right. It's all for justice, and it's for all for the freedom of the people in Hong Kong. I would not say that I'm doing it for other people. I'm not doing it for like Hong Kongers to say I'm great or whatever. I'm doing it for myself, and I'm doing it for my friends and my family because I do want to be with them in Hong Kong. And it's for our freedom to speak our mind. It's just something. It's about human rights. It's about everyone in this world. Like in the U.S., it's like something that is given. It's not something that they have to worry about. Going out to rally. It's like something that they take pride of and they are happy about. But for us, it's a challenge, it's a difficulties, it's something that we would rather not have because we just want to be normal. We just want to live normal in the place that we love. And for us, we have to risk everything, risk our life to even get the chance to speak our mind freely. So I think I just constantly remind myself of this privilege of being outside in the free world. And because I have this privilege, I have the responsibility to speak for other people.
Thank you, Francis. And actually, I would like to ask the last question to both of you. And it takes on a bit, it connects to these last words that you spoke. I was wondering if you have a message. Please be short, because also we are running out of time. If you have a message for the Boom community, and also what can people do at home listening to us who would like to support the cause of Hong Kong? Maybe Simon starts first and then Francis.
Yes, I would say be yourself, and always like to get rid of those, so-called social codes or, all the things that you take for granted. Always be yourself, try to be brave, to be yourself, and reply to Ivan's that I also have no regret. That, to be myself, I would feel, although that is a very sad story, but the things that would make you happy is that you still have a chance to express your own opinion. That's to be heard by, by the world. So I would wanted to say that the Hong Kong story is quite suppressive and it's quite tragic, but to the world, it also means that's so meaningful for you. Why that the freedom is so important. That's so important is because that the dignity of the people, you respect all the people, and not to those people, they, those small bunch of the people, they have a power to arbitrary to abuse that power. onto you. So I think that's all the people that have been, should be back to when we were very young and in the high school or secondary school. The teachers teach us we need to be a decent people. We need to be a decent people, and that's it. And we wanted to insist that value, and we come out the city and we insist that value. But sadly, the government changed their face, and then they suppress us because that's, the government that try to educate, we need to be a good people. Because we are the good people, we wanted to safeguard the others. So that is a very simple message, and that's an encouraging message why we need to safeguard. That's kind of the system we are now living.
And what can people do to support the Hong Kong cause?
Well, I would feel still pay more attention. And as we now very, like to review our strategy, we believe that if there has no any institutional way we try to engage with the system back in Hong Kong, how about we give it back to the civil society? Even individual or one person is so important. And no matter which nationality you have, that's if you're a human being, you need to stand with and to support the people. And so you pay more attention, speak it out, and make it like a social pressures, and let all the people know what is CCP or authoritarian regime actually is. And then we can face the disinformation or the propaganda. We will have even clear mindset to face it. And we need to speak out for that. For those people that have no power, always.
So stay on guard, keep on following what's happening, and speak out for when people are oppressed and are going through a system that enforces injustice on them. Francis, what would you say is your message to the boomers, and what can people do to support?
I would say, do not take freedom as granted. We live in a free world, and it feels like you were born with freedom. And I remember back when I was at elementary school, I was told that we have, all sort of freedom of press, freedom of speech. That's the fundamental value of Hong Kong. But then you wouldn't know that freedom is at risk when you're actually, you see someone is taking it away from you. And I would say to everyone in the free world is that you don't need to experience that. Just see some other examples. You take Hong Kong as an instances. Take other places who that do not have freedom and human rights. Take them as instances, as a reference, and know that this is, freedom is not granted. There are people out there risking their lives for that. And so when you enjoy all sort of freedom, you have the responsibility to speak for them. Even if you have, even if you're not Hong Kongers, you can still do something for us. Spread awareness, raise awareness on social media, on different levels. Whether you're with your friends and at your workplace, you can spread your words of mouth to tell people what's happening in Hong Kong and what's happening in other countries that human rights are being diminished. And I would also want to tell young people is that you can be part of the change. You can make changes. You don't have to always be at school and only care about your academic performances, because in the future, when you graduate from school, you will be out there and the future is ours. And so you have to, take control of your future and, determine your own future. And you are the only person who can do that. If you don't care about the society, if you don't care about it, no one will, because we are taking control of our future, right? So, young generation, young power.
All right. That's a terrific note to end on. I will try to do a quick wrap up of what we've just gone through with our frontliners. We found out that the free world is not always so free, that fundamental rights are at stake for a lot of people in the world right now, and what current generations do will ripple into the future. The protesters in Hong Kong do not want this movement to be characterized as a riot, and they see it as the citizens' right to assemble and dissent. They seek for amnesty for arrested protesters and an independent inquiry into police brutality. The demands were made to be very clear and understandable by everyone, and they were amended when the demand for universal suffrage, the ability for anyone to vote, was added into the list. And this is something that this movement has done well. It has flowed fast. It has learned from water, although it sometimes is more like lava. And they found a way to be really effectively leaderless and shapeless and change. Use tech, use Signal, use community organizing platforms, use art as a vehicle for change, to stimulate the imagination and let people know what is possible, to speak to people on an eye-to-eye level, to really live the bottom-up values, and basically don't take shit anymore from the top-down kind of leadership from authoritarian regimes and politicians. Violence, yes, contentious, but also very clearly stated that it is sometimes the last option left if you are oppressed first and ignored second. And police brutality is under global scrutiny right now. So this is something that I think every country has to revisit and check themselves on. Global alliances have been built, and I loved that you said that you learned from Thailand how to brush off backlash with humor, and learn how to take it easy sometimes. Mainland China censorship has also been a huge problem in understanding how and what is going on. The freedom of speech is not at the same level in other places in the world. So this is, of course, raising more questions and creating this opaque, strange mist around political movements there. And yeah, missing home, family, friends, dim sum, and the nature is a heavy burden, but can function as a fuel as well. And you've definitely both inspired me plenty and are giving me fuel to try in whatever way stand up for some of the values that you've presented to us and are putting your skin in the game for. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Ivan, for the wrap up. Amazing. Very good, important points. And I would like at this point to say goodbye to both of the speakers. Bye-bye, Simon, and bye-bye, Francis.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your invitation. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, and best wishes for a good outcome of the struggle. And so at this point, I would actually like to thank everyone that has been with us through this very intense, but very important journey. Thanks to the people listening, a big hug of support to everyone in Hong Kong, the boomers of Hong Kong that we know that are also there, the ones that maybe will join us in the next edition, if it would be possible. And also shout out to everyone there in the streets facing real tyranny. And I would like to close thanking again the Unite platform for streaming our content, the Boom team for allowing us to do this work. And also, I would like to invite everyone to follow the toolkit for COVID-19. It's a series of short interviews that we are doing to highlight certain topics that we think are important now. Send us your feedback to social media at boomfestival.org. You find all of this information in the comments. What else? Visit the Boom Bazaar. I almost forgot. And stay tuned to the next episodes. There is plenty more coming.
We'll be back with more content and hopefully things that tickle your imaginations and bellies and fires and get you going. See you soon.